At today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on how to enhance your security operations by combining Splunk and GreyNoise. So I'll be the moderator. My name's Abigail Whitten. I'm on the sales team here at GreyNoise. High-level overview of GreyNoise and what we are, right? So if you know people like Shodan and Census that actively scan the web and find information on those IPs based on their scanning activity, we are the opposite of them. They scan the internet and we just listen. And so we do that through a global network of over 8,000 passive sensors that sit in over 50 countries. So we collect packets as IP scan us, we fire hose those packets internally and provide it back as context around IP behavior, methods, and intent. And so for intent, we have 3 specific classifications. Benign, which means that it's a known security provider. So that's where you'll see people like Shodan, like Census. They have a legit purpose for scanning the internet and they follow the rules of doing so. If we see people scanning, but we can't attribute them to any known good service, and we just see them doing generic scanning behavior, that's when they'll fall under unknown. We don't know the intent of this scanning behavior. And then we have malicious. So the moment that we see an IP do anything, any type of behavior that we would deem malicious, like any type of exploitative behavior, that's going to get them slapped with that malicious intent classification. And so that's our first data set. That's called our noise data set. So it's just listening to the background noise on the internet and providing that information back to our users so they can make determinations of, hey, is this IP hitting my perimeter targeted traffic or not? And some other stuff that Nick will get into. But the second data set is Riot. So Riot is a collection of anywhere from 40 to 60 million IPs associated with common business services. Things like Microsoft Office 365, Google, sorry, Facebook, things required that are involved in regular internet use. And then it's also things like public DNS servers or CDNs. And so the application of this data set, it can be really good for filtering through NetFlow. It can be really good for enriching if you're alerting on any outbound traffic. And then it's also just used to say hey, if I block this IP, will I break something for my users? So when you think of those 2 data sets, it kind of rolls up to 3 buckets of use cases. So SOC efficiency, helping analysts make decisions faster, find the targeted threats faster, and have more confidence in their decisions. Threat hunting, and mass exploit defense. So understanding hey, is this vulnerability being scanned for or exploited in the wild, at what scale, and by who? So those are the 3 use cases. That's the TLDR on GreyNoise. So everybody hopefully can gain more out of this webinar if you guys didn't know that information previously. And so with that, I'm going to pass things over to your host, Nick Roy. And he loves Splunk, and he's going to tell you all about why we complement Splunk so well with GreyNoise. So cool. I'm going to stop sharing. But I'm going to give you guys 1 more second with that beautiful image.
What is that from?
That's from Double Down Saloon in Las Vegas.
That's why I remember it.
I take pictures of Nick and I store them to haunt him later.
I'll start making my own slides and do my own intros.
Yeah, no. Over to you, my man.
Was that the surprise for everyone?
No, there's more surprises, guys. Don't worry. We're not that cheap.
Wow. Just wait till you see the next picture I have. Anyway, so let's get right into it. So my name's Nick. I run the sales engineering team. It was at Splunk. If you've used Security Essentials, I spent a lot of time working on that, spent a lot of time working on Phantom. And one of the things that we were always trying to solve, especially at Phantom, was hey, there's just a lot going on out there. How do I just make my life a little bit better? And someone showed me GreyNoise, and I was oh, this is actually kind of slick. So if you haven't seen it before, we have an app on Splunk, and really easy to get started with. Does a couple of cool things. We'll walk through a bunch of kind of different ways you can use the app. Getting set up, if you've ever set up a Splunk app, some of them are really, really good and really easy to set up. Some of them are a little challenging, we'll say. One of the things that sold me right away was when you want to get started with the GreyNoise app, all you need to do is you just go into GreyNoise, you install the app on Splunk. And really all you have to do is just say, I want to just take my API key and I want to just paste it in here. That's all it takes to get set up. There's a couple of other options in there, but as far as configuring apps, pretty easy, no config files or anything like that that you really have to mess with. So it takes an API key, a couple of other options. One of them is this scan deployment tab. If you've seen this, if you're using this, be curious. But what this does is you can basically just specify some of your indexes in here. So a couple of your different indexes, you can drop them in here. If your data is SIM compliant, you can choose which fields hold IP addresses, or if you're like me and you're not SIM compliant at all in your data, you can just specify what fields have IP addresses in them in that particular index. What this will do is basically just goes through on a periodic basis. We'll look up in that index based off of those fields you provided. Just look up against GreyNoise just to get back information. That'll do a couple of things. It builds a nice dashboard. It puts the data in a lookup that we can reference. But if you have a lot of data, depending on how much is in there, if you're looking at like a huge index with firewall data, something that's just hundreds of thousands of events, typically we don't turn this on for that. There's a couple of other things we can do. And one of the new things, one of the very exciting things that I'm excited about at least, is now we can also ingest a feed of GreyNoise data into Splunk. So as an option, if you have a GreyNoise feed already, now what you can do is you can ingest it directly into Splunk. Same thing, stores it as a lookup. But what this lets you do is instead of reaching out and hitting our API all the time, now we have the last 24 hours of data locally. So you can actually reference that first when you're building searches, doing any kind of alerting, things like that. And any kind of larger data sets obviously is going to run faster than doing all the API lookups all the time. So this is a pretty cool option that's in there now. And we'll go through some of this, what it looks like. And then the last two, if you really start to get into the weeds of the features, we do have caching that we can enable for API lookups. You can set a TTL in here. Logging, probably never have to change this, but it is an option there if you just need to get some additional logging if something's going wrong in the app. That being said, really the app does a couple of things. So we can schedule scan deployments on your indexes. We can ingest a feed of data coming in. And then we also just add in custom commands that you can use as part of your regular searches. As you start to turn on the index scanning, we get some of that data coming in. We build a nice pretty dashboard. It says, here's the amount of IPs that we've scanned. Based off of that, how many of those IPs in my indexes have we seen in GreyNoise? Are they part of that noise data set, things that are scanning the internet? Are they part of that Riot data set, which is more just kind of infrastructure for known services? We give you a really nice pretty overview of everything and just build a nice little dashboard of what do we see. In my case, a lot of my data is taken, just a lot of noise in there anyway. Hopefully you don't ever see numbers this bad, but we can start to just kind of get an overview of everything if you do have index scanning turned on. If not a big deal. There's a whole bunch of other cool things we can do. So the easiest way, if we just say, if we want to just do something simple, we'll take something like something simple. I want to take some firewall logs from an endpoint. A lot of noise, a lot of events, a lot of things in here that I probably just don't care about. So one of the first things we can do is we have all these custom commands. I think we're up to about 10 of them now, roughly. Easiest one to get started with if you haven't used Splunk and GreyNoise. It's just this GN quick. Really all this is going to do is, if you haven't seen these custom commands, just hits our API. You provide the field where the IP address is. What do you want to look up? We let this run, hits our API. And then one of the nice things is it returns everything back as fields. So you can go through and start to parse this now, depending on if you are building alerts, if you're just running some kind of ad hoc searches in here. All that data gets returned back to you, so you can start to work with it. So GN quick, what this does, if we pull this up, and I will drop this in the chat as well. So we have a couple of different commands in there, and everything is documented. So I know we'll send out the recording, but if you want to hear my voice again, we have a YouTube video here. We also have all of the notes with details on all of the searches. So I will drop this in the chat also, so everyone has it, if you want to take a look. But essentially what these commands are going to do is they're going to, we can see where it's just returning back information. Basically GN quick, yes or no, has GreyNoise seen any activity from this IP address? Really simple, really easy, really quick. We get back some information about, same kind of idea. Which of the data sets was it seen in? Is it something we saw scanning the internet? Is it part of that kind of known infrastructure? And that's really what we want to kind of use GreyNoise for, is starting to find either some of those things. We can see a couple of them in here. Some of these IPs have never been observed scanning the internet. If I am looking through my data, this might be where some of the interesting things are as I'm starting to look through this. Not that there can't be bad things and all that other stuff, but these things are a little bit more targeted, these 41 IPs here that we see. So we have these custom commands that we use. The other side of this, before we start to dive into some of the other custom commands, because I mentioned this, we do have indicators. So hard to spell in front of people live. We do have the feed of data that comes in. So this gets stored as a lookup. This is really cool too, because in that kind of case, if I do have a lot of data that I'm looking through, maybe I'm not just adding this onto an alert that's being generated, but I have a lot of data I want to look through. Now that we have this feed of data locally, one of the first things we see a lot of people do with this is just trying to make sense of some of these larger data sets that they might be working with. And because I have all this data locally now, I don't have to necessarily reach out and hit our API to get all this data back. Now what I can start to do is I can say, if I take my last example, something like this, I take my firewall logs, but then I can just say, you know what, instead of hitting the API, I want to learn how to spell first of all. It's so nice that autocomplete is in here. Basically what I want to do is I want to just reference my firewall data against my local GreyNoise data now. And I want to just look up any IPs, see what kind of information. And all I really want to find is, I want to find the known scanners in my data. A lot of times this is one of the first things people start with when they start using GreyNoise and Splunk or some of the other integrations. I want to find just kind of the known scanners in my data. So now I can do that lookup, and I can say, or I can do the opposite. I can say either yes, find the known scanners, or find the unknown scanners on there. I want to filter out the census, Shodans, things like that. Different ways depending on how we want to work with that data. But again, we do have it local now, so it does run a lot faster. I can parse out a lot of that data a lot more quickly. And then I can also just say things like, classification. Maybe I want to take out any of the malicious scanners or anything we've seen doing, something bad, attempting to exploit a CVE. I want to find kind of that middle of the road here. I want to find, take out the known scanners, take out the known malicious scanners that we see. Whatever's unknown or just hasn't been seen by GreyNoise, maybe this is where I want to kind of start looking at things, because these are maybe the things where you're clearly up to something in here. We can kind of keep filtering this down because the other side of that data is our riot data. So now that I've done a lot of the lookups, I've cleared out a lot of the data really quickly. Now I can start to tack on some of the other custom commands. So as I start to clear this out more, Now I want to just hit some of those APIs because I've cleared out of my 14,000 events down to about 200. So now I just want to see anything else in there. Is it coming from kind of some of these known services? Let's get some additional context on that. And then if I want, I can kind of keep filtering this out further. We'll take out the knowns, we'll take out the known scammers, the things from common services. We'll take out the things that are just malicious, throwing exploits across the internet. And the cool thing, as we start to filter all this down, so I can just say where GreyNoise riot is 0. So something we haven't observed, we don't know about. And now I really just want to say, you know what, out of all this data, this is where I want to build my alerts, because these are the things I probably really want to know about now. I have all these large sets of data. Maybe I've just turned off some of my alerts on this because they're very noisy, because they're really not doing a lot for me. And these are the ways now where we can kind of start to parse some of that data down. We can filter out a lot of the knowns or the very noisy, like well-known malicious things that we're probably blocking anyway. But I really want to be left over with this list here, because as we start to look at some of these, this is my home firewall data. So maybe not too exciting, some of these IPs, but the idea being now, if I want to start to build my alerts, one, I have a lot of this data locally for a lot of this noisy kind of data sets, but two, now I can also just start to kind of clear out the knowns, clear out the just known malicious, and I want to find things like this. So now I'm just going to call this a very generic firewall alert. We'll set this to run once every day. Sure, at midnight. I don't really want to. We'll just say triggered alerts. And now I can start to set my alerts up that way. But we can take kind of both sides of that data now. And I don't know what I clicked on here, but we can start to kind of filter out a lot of that data. We can turn back on some of those noisy alerts on some of our noisier data sets here. And just make it a little bit easier to find kind of some of these things a little bit earlier, where traditionally maybe we've done some of our alerting as things got a lot worse. So we can do a lot with the couple of the commands. If we have some of that data locally, we can do that. If we take a look at a different set of data, so if we say something like web data, one of my other favorite commands that we have in here. So I have a couple of very unique domains that are very similar to some, let's say, North Korean domains as an example. So I get a lot of weird traffic to these sites. And there's a lot of things in here normally where if we were kind of, we were going to do a little bit of hunting through our logs, maybe I would want to go in and just say, I want to count by status code. What kind of requests? What kind of? What did I type wrong here? URI. Let me try this again. By URI. This is status. I want to just count and say, hey, you know what? Actually, maybe I want to filter this out even more. Status, anything equal to a 200. What are the kind of successful requests that I'm seeing in here? Because maybe this is where I want to start looking at things, because someone found my ignore honey token. Cool. In this case, that's fine. If it wasn't a honey token, maybe I'd want to be a little more concerned here. Different ways where we would kind of want to just look through this data and start saying, you know what, I want to do some hunting. I want to find some of this activity that, obviously my alerting maybe missed out on. I can build some better alerts off of this data. One of the cool things we can do with this, though, is there's another command in here. And this is, I think, my favorite command on the app, because now what I can do is say IP field noise events equals false. What this does, this will actually just filter out any of our logs that we're looking at. So if I have a set of data and I want to just say, you know what, I want to start hunting through a little bit, really good for, again, large sets of data, web logs, firewall logs, NetFlow data, things like that, things that are just kind of a pain to look through. I want to just do a first pass. I want to clear some of this out in my data. And now I want to start to look through this and see, who are kind of these, the scanners that GreyNoise has identified as kind of these, IPs associated with this mass scanning, this mass exploitation. Now I want to start to just filter out, do the first pass, and whatever's left over, now I want to start hunting through this, because these are the things, again, taking out that first layer, these are probably the things that are a little bit more interesting to me if I do want some of that information. So even someone like this guy, this 105 address, making some post requests to me, which is fine. Just gives us another way where we can, outside of building our alerts, just working with these sets of data to say, you know what, I want to just do a quick pass, filter it out the things that we haven't seen. Now I have a good way where I can start digging through this more as I am doing some of my hunting. The other side of this, though, is if we say noise event's true, I want to just filter the other way, because now what I want to do is I want to just say, show me anything GreyNoise has seen, and I can still get pretty clever with my searching. And I can just say line IP, because I want to tack that on at the end. Also, give me all the details about the known scanners, because I also want to know what kind of CVEs have they been scanning for? What kind of other requests have they been making? I want to just get some additional details on some of these things so I can say, you know what, maybe I can pivot off of this. I want to go hunt some of these other things down based off of this activity we've observed from these IPs that have hit me, and from this activity that GreyNoise is providing me as well. So there's kind of all different ways we can start to use this data, whether or not we're just building some of these alerts, if we're working with large sets of data. We have about 5 minutes left, and I actually prepared pages of notes for this, which was a little bit overkill. So one of the other things we can start to do as we have all this data, a couple of other things we can just work with. We talked about some of the alerts that we can work with. Same kind of idea. I want to just take some of my, in this case, firewall data, really just looking at high critical alerts. They don't care about all those medium, low severity alerts, because there's maybe too many of them. Good place to start with GreyNoise, but even just for the purpose of this, so we don't have to look at as much right away. High critical alerts hitting me, high critical alerts outbound for a couple of things. Same kind of idea. We can still go in and take this data, things that we're already working with, and searches I already have, alerts that I'm already building, and I can go in and just add in same kind of thing. It's pretty easy to just say, I want to take what I already have. I want to take the destination IP, and then I want to, we'll just do it this way, source IP, that's IP. I want to just add in GreyNoise to wherever I already have some of these lookups, because I have, in this case, any kind of outbound alerts, and some of them coming back. Again, we probably all know Google DNS. I use this example all the time. But the nice thing about Riot is we can start to do this programmatically at scale to really get a good idea of, hey, you know what? Out of all these, couple of outbound alerts I see, we do see something malicious going to Office 365, which is fun, but this guy here, we don't really see going outbound to anything that we know about. So again, this might be the one where if I'm looking this up, I'm going to start tracking this down. Maybe this is the one I want to start with first and give a little bit more priority. We can also just, kind of apply the same thing. Any of those inbound alerts, as I do have my dashboards, same thing. I can always just tack in the VN quick equals source IP. I want to just add that in to my dashboards that I'm already building. Back in the GreyNoise data. And then I can always just turn this back into another dashboard just to build some of that additional context to say, you know what, out of all these things that I see, what are kind of the, the knowns, and what are the things where we haven't seen any of this activity? So even if I wanted to say, I want to start to build my dashboard off of this and say, code message, we'll just big stats guy. I want to just stats count, run that, give me my nice little visualization, because I already have a lot of my dashboards built up, but I want to just start giving myself a little bit more code message with the underscore. I want to start to build this out. And then I want to just kind of add on to my dashboard some of these additional fields that GreyNoise is providing. So I can be a little bit, clued in on maybe where I want to start looking at some of these alerts or different things that we're generating for what we've already built. So I'm going to save that to my dashboard, and then I can always just go in and keep kind of building that out. 2 seconds, I promise I'll stop, and I'll turn it back to you, Abigail. One of the last things that's really kind of cool, we get a lot of questions about building reports with GreyNoise, and if you use Splunk, like I do, you can do this a lot of other ways also, because it's just pulling in that feed of data every 24 hours. But a lot of people ask for reports. We don't have reports necessarily in GreyNoise, but if you have Splunk and you like building dashboards or reports in there, very easy to pull in the data. This was one example that we came up with the other day was, I want to get an idea for a particular region of the world. What do we see coming from, we'll pick Canada. Haven't used them as an example today. What's coming out of Canada that GreyNoise has observed? Because I want to know what's going on there. Maybe there are other places that are a little more interesting. We can build this for different providers. A lot of different ways we can kind of build up this data and generate that report. But it is one way where we can, we've used this a couple of times now, just to build some of these reports today, understanding of what's going on with a particular region vulnerability provider. In this case, Canada has a ton of things coming out of it, which is interesting. And just kind of gives us a way where we can get some of that overview of the GreyNoise data. And that leaves 1 minute to spare. Sorry, Abigail. Didn't get enough time for embarrassing pictures that I've taken of you, but we'll save that for the next one.
One quick question I want to ask Nick is, what did you not have time to share, so that if people are interested in the things you did not have time to share, they can reach out and set something up?
Just more dashboarding, alerting, hunting, things like that. You just kind of hit the very high level of everything, just going deeper on some things.
Awesome. And then in the chat, does the Splunk integration work with a community account?
It does not. But if you want to try it out, you can turn on a trial, or I'll turn one on for you if you're interested.
Yeah, so Nick's email, if you want a trial turned on, is there. You beat me to it. Okay.
I got you.
So I know we're over, but yeah, if there are any other chats, you can go on ahead and throw them in the Q&A and we'll get to them. Okay, one other that I got is if you're doing like bulk lookups or filtering and you hit the tables, how often should you refresh like a lookup table within Splunk?
So good question. Lookup table gets refreshed every 24 hours. So as long as if you're using our built-in configuration, it's every 24 hours it gets updated. If you want to run it more, you certainly can. But it runs every 24 hours. It pulls in the last 24 hours of data. So that's why it's a good kind of first pass. And then you can always just hit the API if there's anything left over. But it's more for kind of getting that bulk out of the way.
Cool. And then we have a question in the chat from Lisa. Do similar integration capabilities exist with other SIEM solutions?
They do. And I'm going to pull up the docs because I know QRadar offhand, but I can never remember all of them. QRadar, Elastic, Sentinel, Panther, Sumo Logic. And I'll drop this in the chat too.
Yeah, and I will note, Lisa, like Splunk is definitely our most robust integration. And so if you want to learn more about like what what capabilities are available within your SIEM, whatever camp you fall into, you can set up some time with us, with Nick, and he'll go through that with you and just say, because sometimes like we are limited by the capabilities within that platform that we're integrating with. So while we would love to have like full API parity, full integration parity for every integration, like IP timeline, sometimes we just can't display it in the integration partner, or IP similarity. Like sometimes there's just not a good way to pull up those tables. But or like anomaly, for instance, right? Like we have a malicious feed with them, and we'd love to pull in a benign feed too to clean up anomaly in a more cost efficient manner, an API call efficient manner, but anomaly does not have the concept of benign feeds. So like there's some technical limitations with integration partners, but if you want to learn more about it, we can schedule some time to walk you through what the capabilities are within yours. Yeah, awesome. Okay, any other questions? And then we'll wrap if there aren't.
I think that should be our next webinar. Seam versus SIEM, daemon versus daemon. There's so many of them. CISO versus CISO. I just need clarity from everyone.